You've really brought up already parking, and that will bring us into areas of controversy. But let's bring our viewer along with us.
Okay.
An agreement with the city on the parking payment has just concluded. Would you tell them about that? That agreement went into 2005, why it has concluded, how much was paid, so then we can move forward from that.
I just want to make a point of clarification in that the agreement has not expired. In 2005, there was an agreement between the DDA and the city that related to the rent that was paid for the parking system. So the city owns they own the decks, they own some of the lots, they own the meters, and the DDA then leases that infrastructure from the city and operates it on their behalf. And so there was an agreement in place that probably started in '92 and then continued in 2002. My understanding, again, because this was before I was a board member at the DDA, but in 2005, that agreement was renegotiated, a 10-year agreement that provided $1 million a year for the DDA to lease that system to operate it on the city's behalf. The city had the option of taking an additional $1 million each year. So it became basically, they front-loaded their whole agreement. They took $2 million
for 5 years.
For 5 years. So their last payment was this last fiscal year. In my opinion, there's still 5 years left on that agreement. They just have no more money coming to them because they've taken all of their rent payments already from the DDA.
Right. So that was a major concern of that was brought up, I think, when that agreement was made, what was going to happen if, in fact, they did. And my understanding is that in the agreement in 2005, one of the whereas clauses state that the city is facing a funding crisis. This is back in 2005. And the city was asked to significantly increase its payments. So now the city is in even worse situation and looking forward to even leaner times, and is again asking the city for funding. For this is called a mutually beneficial agreement. And tell us something about that, because you were very involved in why it's been stalled for 1 year. Tell us about that, if you will.
Yeah, so the DDA board realized, as the city kept asking every year for their additional $1 million, that come this year they would have taken all of their the money out of the contract, and that we'd likely be faced with the situation of being asked for more. And so the DDA, I should say, does their budget planning in a 10-year cycle. So we're very mindful of what's going to happen, every year from now for 10 years. And so looking forward, we thought, well, we need to be able to plan what's going to happen. Is the city going to come asking for more money? There were a lot of allusions to the fact that the city might do that. Even last year in their budget, they kept kind of plugging in $2 million as if we just give it to them, as we have been giving to them. So
Let me interrupt for 1 second, because something I did say, that you were board president at the time of this tumult, right?
Yes. So as the board chair, I asked the board to create a committee that would be available to the city to start talking about a mutually beneficial agreement. In my opinion, I didn't think it was it would have been too difficult to renegotiate, or inappropriate to renegotiate an agreement that had already been in place that still had 5 years left on it. And I said, let's not renegotiate that agreement and add more money to it, and let's just keep that in place. Maybe we can find a new mutually beneficial agreement between the city and the DDA, because certainly the paying rent is reasonable for the parking system. The DDA benefits from that. So let's see if we could find something that we could come to agreement on. And so we set up a committee at the DDA, and we said we're available to talk. And the city didn't seem to be interested in talking. They didn't. They had passed a resolution, I believe, around the same time that had said that they would like to find a mutually beneficial agreement, and then they didn't do anything about talking with our committee. So it seemed as if perhaps myself and another board member that I had,
Graff,
Renee
yes.
Graff, who I had asked to be on she was the board treasurer at the time, and I had asked her to also be on our committee, as I did, if I recall, in the beginning phase. I asked also the chair of our operations committee, Roger Hewitt, and another board member, Gary Boren, who is a downtown resident. And it seemed as if, because Renee and I had been very vocal in opposing the idea of just handing the city $2 million, perhaps because of some things that were going on related to the underground parking deck, that the city council didn't want to sit down with me and possibly Renee and discuss this, because they felt like we wouldn't come to a mutually beneficial arrangement, which I feel like is unfortunate, because Renee and I were I thought pretty clear all along that it wasn't that we were opposed to giving money to the city. We were just opposed to giving them a check for nothing, that we wanted to benefit from paying them something, and we wanted something in return. So Renee was then, her term expired, and there was a new board member put in her place, and so we put a new member on the committee when she was no longer on the board, and then I stepped down from the committee about the time my chairpersonship ended, and so that committee has been on its own now. I haven't been involved, and I understand from our last meeting this week that the committee has been meeting with the city, and they have been in discussions.